Marty, tell me a little bit about how, what to expect for clients comparing this process, Med-Arb, to plain old litigation. How does the price, how does the cost compare? Laura, do you want to go first?
It really depends how quickly they come to a resolution and whether that resolution is being whether they arrive to that resolution in mediation or they have to move to arbitration. So if they resolve everything in mediation, it's just like any other pure mediation cost. And if they move to arbitration, there's a lot more cost involved. And Marty can speak to that more, but sometimes depending on the issue at hand, there are experts that have to be called in. There's reports that have to be produced. There's investigations that have to be proceeded with. So that in itself can become a lot more costly. But Marty, you can speak to that a little bit more for that piece.
Yeah, I mean, it could. Okay, so in arbitration, you're not paying for the judge. You are paying for the judge, and when you go to court, you're not paying for the judge. You're paying. I can't remember what it went up to, $400 and something to set it down a trial now. That's so you're not, but that's a bargain. I mean, really, you have the courtroom and court reporters and everything. So that's a big issue. So you're sharing in the cost, mind you, of the arbitrator, which obviously lessens the blow. Or depending, sometimes people will do it in percentages. A lot of our arbitrators don't like that. They just feel that people should invest equally. But it can be a very expensive procedure. I mean, it can be. I'm going into, in 2 weeks, a 7-day arbitration. They've been at it now for, I think, 6 years, trying to negotiate a settlement. And then finally we got all these people involved, accountants and forensic people and all this. And it's become really expensive.
Oh, wow.
So it may not necessarily, I find it, if you could, when people used to come to me in my office, I'd say to them, is there anybody that you know in this world who you respect and he respects or she respects, that you can go to and sit down at the kitchen table and just generalization, not the law, but just generalization to come up with some sort of solution to lessen the blow? And most people say no, unfortunately, because one person might say, well, I like my Uncle Joe, but my husband doesn't like Uncle Joe because they had a big fight with one another, or I don't like his mother because she's this or that or whatever. So that makes it difficult. But generally speaking, and I remember recently a lawyer who does a lot of mediation arbitrations made that comment that we shouldn't necessarily be selling this as a cost factor, because when it gets into the Med-Arb, with the Arb part, it can be very expensive. I try to dissuade these people. I asked them for a larger than necessary retainer, and they said fine, because they're so fed up. Yeah. And that's another thing, is that how do you get clients? It's the fed up clients, I find. But Laura, I think, gets more people outside of, before they've been indoctrinated into the court system. But I get a lot of people where trial dates are set. They're going to trial in a month. We went to court on a trial management conference, and the judge said, you know what, you really should try mediation. Why don't you do Med-Arb? Why don't you try mediation? And so they come to try to hope that they can save themselves, $30,000. So this arbitration I'm going into 6 days is probably going to cost them $40, $50, $60, $70, $80,000.
Yeah, still pretty expensive.
Oh,
yeah,
very. So I don't. When you get into arbitration, it's expensive. It's easier going. There's no question about it. You may feel a lot more comfortable, especially if you've had mediation. with that same person, so you know what to expect and how to address the person and that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's not, when it gets to arbitration, no, it's difficult. I mean, even mediations can be tough. It seems like every mediation because so Laura and I do a lot of co-mediation. In fact, FMG pretty well does co-mediation, Family Mediation Services Group. Sorry, FMG G Group. Yes. So they do. So only co-mediations are 99%. It's, you get 2 for 1, so 2 people for 1. In other words, we split fees, you know, and so they get the benefit of 2 people looking into their case, which is great. But even then, they can still be expensive. It depends if the parents, you know, get a little loony at sometimes, and they come back and they're all upset, and you know, a lot of people will say, okay, fine, I agree with this, blah blah blah. Then they put the keyboard away, and then they get on their computer the next morning and said, what have I done, you know? So then you go back to the table again. It could be expensive. It could also be, you know, pricey. Could add up. The more conflict there is, the more trouble there will be. The more that lawyers fight, and believe me, lawyers hate hearing this, but the more that your lawyers fight with one another, the more you'll pay. And so it's a pleasure when you deal with a lawyer that's reasonable on the other side. And even if the client is not reasonable, doesn't necessarily mean that you should be a hired gun. You should be able to sort of, a lot of people will say under the table, say, look, you know, take you aside and say, look, my client's being very difficult. Maybe we can deal with it in this way. And it's in that client's best interest ultimately. But having said that, yeah, I mean, I think overall it would be less expensive. Expedia, yeah, Expedition, yes. They're setting settlement conference dates in Brampton, I think now into September and October. Yeah. I mean, it's just insane. So it's, and I think Toronto, which is usually much faster, they're into the summer. So unless there's a real emergency, like some kids being kidnapped on the plane on a tarmac or something, it's very hard to get it before a judge these days. I mean, it's great for mediators. The mediation business is booming. I mean, it's because people know what's going on, and now that the Zoom thing has come along, that's made a big difference. People don't have to go away. They can stay in the comfort of their home. They don't have to see their spouse at court, sit in the courtroom with the person, or have comments made or body language, you know, flare-ups and who knows what, which I've seen it all. So it's not a bad deal. Like that way, it's a lot more user-friendly for the person.
So that makes a lot of sense, because the more conflict there is, the more expensive and the more time consuming that process is going to take.